we were on a journey uh, in one Caribbean country, and I went there and standing around with a group of young men from that place, and they were inquiring after a while, okay, where are you from? And I said, I'm from the United States of America. He said, oh, you're a whitey man. I said, well, wait a minute. Look at the complexion of my skin. Are you colorblind? Something wrong with you?
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Welcome to the penultimate show in the 6-part special by the Review of Religions on race relations and race inequality. We're reaching to the end of these shows and we hope you're enjoying it. Do check out our website, reviewofreligions.org, and make sure you leave a comment below, engage in the discussion, and do subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Islamic teachings are there to follow, but of course, people are in situations where it may seem difficult. It's not easy. We can't just say it, we have to realize the sensitivities and the deep pain that's there. So what advice would you have in the sense that you've had the benefit of experiencing, as I've spoken to some elderly African Americans, they tell me, look, you might think, you young people, that this is the first time this has happened, but this is not the first time this has happened. We've seen such events in our life happen before. We've seen big street protests happen in our life before, and things return back to normal. So of course this is a horrific event, but in our life we've seen similar events happen before. So what lesson can we take? Because as I said, there's deep pain. It's we have to find a way forward, but it's not always easy to take that way forward.
As they say, you don't build Rome in one night or one day. This march, which they are now embarked upon, is more, as they say, like a marathon than a sprint. And people want to get to the end of this, this race, this struggle quickly and put it behind them. That is the urgency you see for all people. Let's get a response right away from government and whoever we're trying to convince to change a policy or positions, etc. But it's not a sprint. This is a marathon. Our beloved messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in Mecca, it took him 2 decades plus to change the societal order, which was also full of all kinds of issues, gender issues, color issues, economic issues, moral and ethical issues. And he had to labor, with great patience and prayer and wisdom and engagement of society and enduring all kinds of opposition and loss of life and so many things over that period. And if he wasn't prepared to do that, he would not have succeeded. So the fact of the matter is, when we go to someone and says, oh, there's no racism here, or it's just your emotion, or just, don't worry about that. Look, you've achieved this and that, and why are you bringing these things up now? This is where you try to erase someone's own personal or societal experience, a group's experience, by trying to say to them that this doesn't exist now. You're just miscalculating, misunderstanding, misperceiving what's going on, right? George Floyd is a perfect example. As much as we've spoken today about the horrendous, horrific, the inhumane action against this human being, there are others who say it was justified. There are others who are supporting the police officers, saying that they were responding to the force exerted by him refusing to be arrested, by him being in some state of intoxication or drug-induced behavior, by him committing a petty crime of dropping a $20 bill for some purchase, which was a counterfeit coin, a counterfeit dollar. So they're justifying and saying, see, there's always, embellished these things. There's nothing going on there. There are these groups that want to jump in and try to take advantage of everything. And so behind them come the rioters and the anarchists and, the anti-government folks. And this is all that's going on. It's a left-wing ploy, and they turn it into politics. They turn it into economics. They turn it into other things other than what it is. It's an institution that has never been dismantled since the day they claimed you are free to walk in this nation and achieve the American dream. Until that happens, a problem will exist. But until that happens, we must also recognize one more thing, Mr. Fiasab. It is not only the African Americans who feel this pain by God's grace. It is also European and white Americans here and around the world. We have to also recognize that there are allies on both sides of this fence. And so for us to say that no one sees and feels and understands what we're going through, that would be equally unjust and wrong. So at the end, we must also acknowledge that as there's a group that wants to erase us from the conversation, there's a group that's raising a voice and magnifying our voices in the conversation, and their partners are equally important from the society that is before that was this, the supremacist group. Amongst them, their children and their grandchildren. They are the ones becoming the partners in this marathon. And as we go forward, the more partners we gain, the more voices that are lifted, the more people who support it, the faster we can get to the end of this race and work for the justice all are seeking. So I think this is part of the thing that I want to also to make clear. We are not saying this is a totally Black issue which only Blacks support and a few other people here. There are many layers of support coming from all aspects of society, including those who originally or who are currently, I would say, are privileged and part of the group that is enjoying their life in America. So we must recognize that too.
It goes on to something, His Holiness, the head of the community. I mean, he mentioned something which goes down to societal level, which I think is very interesting. And he said this in an address actually at the opening of the Beit al-Afiyat Mosque in Philadelphia, which is the first purpose-built mosque in 100 years, I believe, in Philadelphia, one of the first. And this was in 2018. And he said, "It is a fact of life that human beings are such creatures who cannot survive without social interaction and without developing mutual relations with other people. Irrespective of differences of race, religion, or social background, we are united as human beings, and so it is vital we interact with other people, rather than isolating ourselves or only mingling with members of our own particular community. In all respects, dialogue is crucial, breaking down barriers and increasing mutual understanding and knowledge. And we champion the right of all people to live their lives free from discrimination or prejudice." So Dr. Basir, based on this, when we talk about these divides in St. Louis, the Delaware divide, the Chicago divide, in other places the divide is subtle, in other places the divide is clear-cut. But as His Holiness is saying, and this is something which everyone can acknowledge logically, that until you mingle with one another and you start to understand each other's cultures, will never break down these barriers, because the person who's, just living somewhere where he's never interacted with people from his other race, it's going to be very difficult to make them understand. How do we achieve that?
So I think there are, of course, a couple of pathways to approach this, right? One of the things we have to remember, going back a little bit to the question of results and where we find ourselves today, it cannot be discounted that because of the energy and the activism of many people before us, despite the challenges that we're facing, we face in the United States, President Barack Obama himself wouldn't discount the fact that he as a Black man was elected to the presidency in the United States, and that's an achievement for a country in which the majority of African Americans, you could argue, really got some true sense of liberation in about 1965, right? With the Voting Rights Act and the various education acts that guaranteed a certain level of equity in the society. So in about 2 generations, we were able to see the rise of more African Americans to certain aspects of power. If I look right here in St. Louis at Ferguson, so we know the events of Ferguson in 2014, it's not a secret. The killing of Michael Brown and the massive protests around that. It was also in some cases international. This year, 2020, Ferguson elected for the first time an African-American woman mayor in the town. In addition to that, a lot of the areas that had been destroyed or that had been left behind that would lead to the kind of inequities in Ferguson are being worked on, right? So they're putting new youth centers in, they're putting new spaces in for the young people to have opportunities. And that's what we're advocating for, right? That's what we want to see. We want to see equal opportunity for all the kids that live on the two sides of Ferguson or on the two sides of any city divide. So I think it's happening in part because of the prayers and the work and the continued prayers and the work and the continued prayers and the work on agitation. Barack describes it as, 2 steps forward and sometimes 2 steps backward, right? So we know that as a reality. In terms of what Caliph Masih himself has told us, that's a part of this mingling, right? That, inequities are not going to disappear if we're kind of cocooned in our own corners. And one of the things everybody's kind of questioning, where's this thing going to go? I am actually quite hopeful that for the first in a long time, universally, it's not just Black people or African Americans who are on the front lines of these protests, right? Here in the United States, some of these towns, they don't have any Black people. There are no Black residents, but they're protesting, right? So to me, that indicates that that sense of justice and that sense of awareness is going beyond the walls of individual groups and communities. And I think that's the core, even if you think about the heart of the Islamic message is really all about that you want for your brother what you want for yourself, right? Throughout the society. So I think that's the heart of that message, and that Caliph Masih delivered somewhere in Philadelphia. That's also critical as well. Also one of our fractured cities. So that sense of unity matters, and advocating for that unity matters.
Dr. Hassan, what Maulana Azhar was saying before about the fact that, we must unite as people. And when you yourself have experienced these things in America, nobody cared whether you were African American or Ghanaian African. They just, as you felt yourself, they just saw the color of your skin. So just echoing what Azhar Sahib was saying, that, how can we build about this unity more? Because there are people who are trying to create divisions as well, unfortunately. And this is a time for unity.
The point that Dr. Rodney mentioned is what I would echo here, is the need for education. Oftentimes, the lack of education has created even more divisions amongst us, right? It is often said, if you're an African, you're among the privileged people, because even to get the money to buy a ticket, you had to come from a wealthy family to be able to come here. Well, that is not always the case, but even if you grant that, in terms of addressing the issues at hand here with regards to mistreatment of people of color, and the recognition that they don't ask whether you are from Ghana or from anywhere, they just see you as Black. We need to come to some type of realization that, we must educate ourselves. A lot of these things sometimes have to do with the lack of awareness and understanding of the system itself. If people understood that participating in local elections are important, and that, we talk about gerrymandering, a term that is used in politics, and then it resurfaces every time there's election. Drawing the electoral map in such a way that it favors a particular group of people. If people understood that participating in local elections, state elections, really is what leads to this type of gerrymandering, maybe they'll pay a bit more attention. So there's a need for us to educate ourselves. For Africans, Blacks from Africa, who, as somebody reminded me, are not African American because they are not descendants of slaves. Maybe they should show more understanding of the plight of African Americans in this country. And maybe African Americans should also see them, to welcome them and see them as being part of the struggle. And if you do that, and then add the fact that, as Imam Azhar Hanif mentioned, that we see a lot more people who are not of the Black race, who are also joining forces with the oppressed people to seek justice, then we'll be going somewhere. I think that is the contribution. one that we must educate ourselves. We must all be willing to show that type of empathy and then feel that we all have a skin in this game or in this fight, and then move forward. And we would have a better result than leaving it only to a group that we believe are the ones that are affected, so they should go and do their own fighting.
It's an emergent thought in some corners of the African American community today, this idea that somehow, Africans in the United States had a distinctive experience from Africans everywhere else, and therefore, there's a kind of monopoly on this, American experience. They have a fancy name. They call themselves African descendants of slavery or something like that. But I think I want to make it very clear here that, number one, oppression in any form is oppression, right? And to understand that the slave trade, as we describe it, that in terms of Africans, was called a transatlantic slave trade. And people had names for it. They called it the Middle Passage, and some people call it the MAFA, the Black Holocaust. And at its core was an international redistribution of Black people from the primarily western coast of Africa throughout the 21 countries of the Caribbean and the other, 3 or 4 countries of North America, in multiple languages by multiple European cultures. It was always an international enterprise. So a part of this education experience is to help other people, African Americans, as well as those of us from other parts of the African diaspora, to fully understand that this was an experience that affected all of us, regardless of our language and our cultures and our geography, right? It created a framework that was global. So we cannot struggle against it from a local perspective. We will not be able to truly destroy it if we think of it as these local things.
Maulana Azhar was mentioning earlier that Jamaica was also one of the central points of this transatlantic slave trade.
Yes, absolutely. So at different times in the history of slavery or the transatlantic trade, Jamaica had an outsized role at different times, right? So in the early parts of the experience, when Columbus arrives in the Caribbean, he discovers, if you will, I put that in quotes, Jamaica on his 4th voyage. And it is said that the natives of Jamaica, the native women of Jamaica, native Jamaican women were the ones that actually tried to chase him away because they were clear this was a problem. But the history tells us that at different points in time, different parts of the system had an influence, right? So at one time it might have been Jamaica, at other times it was Florida, at other times it was Cuba, Haiti, Dominica. It just depends. Hispaniola looms large in the Spanish world. Brazil looms large in the Portuguese experience. So, but that's the point, that it was always an international experience. We came over, somebody always repeats to me, used to repeat to me when I just became a Muslim, one of the people I became a Muslim close to was a Garveyite lady. And she said, we all came over on the same slave ships. There was no class on those ships, right? And the Africa from which we were coming was being depeopled. So we were all being impacted in different ways, right? Slavery and colonialism was impacting us in these different ways. So those divisions I worry about. Also remember, one of the key hallmarks of the system was to never make the enslaved people unified. That was one of its key goals. If they would unify, they would overthrow the system. So how do we make them feel disunited? Oh, you speak different languages anyways. You come from different cultures anyways. You're over here, you're over there. So that was meant to create division. So we have to be careful of those divisions. Unity is what we should really seek, right? When Haiti, I give the example of Haiti, when the Haitian planter class was overthrown and the island taken, the majority of those who could run away ran to where? Louisiana territory, which extended from Louisiana all the way up to Minnesota to the top of the Mississippi River. They came all the way over here to these places, right? Because again, it was an international thing. You were French, you could move throughout the French-speaking world. This is the reason why Canada is 2 countries, right? It's 1 country with 2 core languages. Hispaniola, Spanish and French, just the same, right? If you just look at the different language groups, it's an international thing. So division is not good for what we're trying to do. We should respect each other's location in the struggle. I understand that, and we can't subsume each other. I get that too. but we must definitely understand that the experience was meant to destroy us and to separate us. So unity is what we seek, and we should foreground the unity and educate our people about the need for that unity.
Ahmad Sahib.
Yes.
Basir Radi knows, and I'm not going to mention the country, but we were on a journey in one Caribbean country, and I went there and standing around with a group of young men from that place, and they were inquiring after a while, okay, where are you from? And I said, I'm from the United States of America. He said, oh, you're a whitey man. I said, well, wait a minute. Look at the complexion of my skin. Are you colorblind? Something wrong with you? How are you calling me whitey? And he said, oh, no, I don't mean based on your color of your skin, but based on the identity of where you come from. Your mindset, your way of life, everything is like all those who come down from that country to our country. And so we call all of you, no matter what your external feature, the whitey man. And it really struck me, as Basir Radi Sahib is saying, that it is always this sense of us versus them. And that's the kind of paradigm the world wants to keep pushing us into. That we are the us, we got to protect us, and everyone else is our enemy. And we have to oppose them and overwhelm as far as possible. But the Islamic model is absolutely different than that. Diametrically opposed to that. It says it's just us. It is only a universal us, a global us, a unified us from God Almighty. And in that sense, I would again say the beauty of Islam is, and I think once you also mentioned this, that Huzur was raising the point about our beloved messenger, that look at the way he approached these issues, right? He was an Arab, but he championed the cause of the non-Arab as loud as possible. I mean, his voice was raised the loudest for not the Arabs, but the non-Arab, for the people of the other gender, of the lower classes. So I think this is the key, as you talked about, where is the way to build this understanding. Building it is not just those of a certain group raising their voices. The real coalition is when people of another group identify that this is my group too. Identify that this is part of my family too. It's just a family of a certain, you can say ethnic feature, but this is my family. And once we achieve this position in any country or any group, then that's where unity comes in. It's not just to say we're united because we're Americans. We see that's not working. You're not united because you're Europeans. All white Europeans will be against all colored Europeans because of the color issue. So this is where the struggle comes in. We're united when in that mind of ours, in that heart of ours, we don't see each other as the other, as a stranger, as the them. We see everyone as part of whoever we are, as us. And the others will do the same thing. So I appreciate this concept of our beloved messenger, who was a voice for those who were not like him in terms of ethnicity or origin or color or status, etc. It was a voice universal for all humankind, or no matter what their positions may have been or their differences may have shown. So alhamdulillah, I think coming toward probably the end of this conversation, looking for solutions, the Islamic model presents a way of identifying beyond what is your own personal experience and trying to become truly human, which means as a human being, I don't just sense the pain of myself. Islamic model is human beings are like one family or one body, the believers are like one body. It's the same, you can state it, the human family is like one body. Any part of that body would affect the rest, you feel the pain of it. And so it's this model that people are looking for right now. Who feels the pain of African Americans in the world, in the nation? Is it just blacks? Then we're lost. It's not going to work. Is it just a few whites and a few Latinos and others? Then we still be lost. We say we're United States of America. When the whole united group truly is united and feels the pain for each other, then this is the ideal that we talk about we're trying to achieve. We haven't achieved it. We're trying to achieve it, right? And since 1776, signing that document up to now, it's a great ideal. It's not a reality. How to make it real is, I think there's only one way. All this conversation, has been great, but to me, the bottom line is still what Azur is saying. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. It's the only way. You take God out of the equation, everything else is going to be division. But put the one universal God back in the equation, everything can be resolved. You break down every barrier, whether it's based on color, language, culture, political divisions, economic orders, intellectual, everything is removed once you put God back in the equation. But it has to be the one true God who is universal for all, not some nation's God or some people's God or some race's God or some one's purported God that they build out of some images that they want to throw in front of you. The one true God. In my own life, I haven't seen anything else that helped me to feel connected to the rest of humankind other than this concept. Everything else is temporary, it has no permanence. But this is the bottom line to me. I think the world has to come around to true spiritual understanding of this great concept of God being one.
As always, thank you very much for joining us. We just have one show left, the next show, so do not miss our final episode in the 6-part special. Until then, peace be upon you.